everyone, and welcome to the January edition of the SANS Threat Analysis Rundown. I'm Katie Nichols. I'm a certified instructor for Forensics 578 Cyber Threat Intelligence. Also work at Red Canary, and particularly relevant for today, I'm one of the 3 co-chairs for the upcoming SANS Cyber Threat Intelligence Summit, which is coming up on Monday because it is January. I don't know about you. I hope you had a great holiday, but this month has hit me fast and furious. Plan for today is to give you a little bit of a sneak preview into the summit. We'll drop a link in the chat. It is totally free, live online. And in fact, right now, that's your only option to attend because we're totally full with in-person registration. So if you want to plan to next year, you might want to check out early in the year to make sure you can come in person, but you can still register free, live online. We have a ton of talks, and what we've found in previous years is we like to give you a little sneak preview and kind of a primer of what to expect. And especially for folks who are newer to the field, what maybe key concepts or what should you be thinking about going into the summit, because there is so much content, one of our favorite events of the year. And so to give you a preview, I am joined by my illustrious co-chairs, Rebekah Brown and Rick Holland. I will let each of them introduce themselves. We've been working together for years. So excited to do the CTI Summit. Becca, do you want to start by explaining who you are other than a summit co-chair?
Yes. Thank you so much, Katie. I'm happy to be back. This is like my favorite annual tradition is getting to chat with you two before the summit. My name's Rebekah Brown. I'm one of the co-authors for the SANS Forensics 578 Cyber Threat Intelligence course. I'm also co-author of the book Intelligence-Driven Incident Response, and I'm a senior researcher at the University of Toronto's Citizen Lab. So working at the intersection of digital security and human rights, kind of focused on that cyber threat intelligence angle. So super, super happy to be here.
Excellent.
Not as happy as
And
me.
Rick?
Not as happy as me. As you said, I love to work with y'all in the summit. I don't know if this is 6th year. I can't remember how many. This is the 13th year of the summit. And fun fact, I presented at the first one, which regular attendees, we kind of will make jokes. I had a lot more hair and looked a lot younger when I did. But I'm Rick Holland. I am a field CISO at ReliaQuest. As I said, I've been involved in the summit since its start, and it's my favorite event. I like it. It's a more intimate event, and I really like that compared to some of the really large ones that we all attend.
Yeah, absolutely. It is always fun to kind of bring the CTI nerds together. And we have a super packed agenda. I'd love to hear in the comments, are you signed up? Are you coming on live online? Are we going to see you in person? Because if we're going to see you in person, there we go. Looking forward to it. Nigel's already registered. So if you were not registered, again, free, live online. We'd love to see you. We'll be hanging out. One of the cool things about summits, there's a Slack. So, right, in person, you get to kind of have the hallway conversations, which we certainly will. But virtually, we have a Slack channels for each talk. There's usually like a new to cyber channel. We'll talk about that, tracks. So we usually drop in there and chat with folks as well. So, all right, let's dive in and take a look at the agenda and what we are doing. So 2 days in Alexandria, but we'll be joined live online. And there's so many different things happening. Like some of the stuff is in person only. I know, sorry, a little bit of FOMO. Online folks, there's plenty for you as well. And so maybe a good place to start is with our keynotes. And I will be honest, every year we meet months ago and we're like, what should our keynotes be? And I'm like, I have no idea. And thank goodness we have Becca who comes in. She's like, I have some great ideas. And so Becca, would love for you to talk to us about Jeannie. When you suggested Jeannie, I was like, I've never heard of her or the Center for Anticipatory Intelligence, but this seems cool.
Yeah, I'm really excited that we've got Dr. Jeannie Johnson joining us for our day 1 keynote. Jeannie is amazing, and I think that, and I know that, and I think you're absolutely right, Katie, that not a whole lot of people have either her work or the Center for Anticipatory Intelligence on their radars, but I think they will after next week. So what Jeannie does is really focus on how we can hone skills that can be used to work in an increasingly complex world. And so her work has pivoted into the cyber domain, but she worked with Central Intelligence Agency. She's pioneered a couple of different tools and frameworks that she'll talk about bringing in cultural topography when you're analyzing what a particular group or region might do, and how you as an organization or an individual can prepare yourself to be able to act quickly based on knowing all of the variables. And one of the things I love about cyber threat intelligence is that we continue to get more complex. Maybe we were always that complex and we're just peeling back the onion. But as I think we'll talk about with some of the other talks that we'll have, there is just a very, very complicated threat landscape out there. And it is getting, I think, more complicated by geopolitical events, by kind of all sorts of different outside variables. And so bringing Jeannie in to talk about how she approaches solving problems and preparing for dealing with some of these situations, I think is really going to help all of us like up level our CTI game.
Absolutely. And one thing that we can chat a little bit about, this anticipatory intelligence thing. Like credit to Robert M. Lee, your co-author for Forensics 578. I think he said, what is it? Becca, maybe you've heard him say it. It's like prediction is for fortune tellers. We as Intel analysts anticipate. And this is a really interesting field. I don't know if like, how about, okay, it's January. How about this one? Can you predict, right, what cyber threats are going to happen in 2025? And like, I don't know, maybe not. But we're often asked to, I like the term anticipate. I'm curious, like, Rick, is this something that, you know, your teams have done? I feel like we've had talks about this in the CTI Summit before. Like, how do we think about this field of anticipating?
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I think predictions trigger a lot of people. And I used to be a Forrester analyst, so we would make our predictions just like Gartner would. At Digital Shadows, where I ran our Intel team for a number of years before we got acquired, we focused more on forecasting and using rigor. So I'm looking to see my SAT book somewhere on a bookshelf on the top right. But having rigor around looking forward into the future, talking about your key assumptions, all that sort of stuff, because we need to have a higher bar as Intel analysts. And I think this anticipatory intelligence and the stuff that she'll talk about will contribute to that. And we've also had previous talks over the years, I mean, over 13 years, but just more rigor, kind of more tradecraft from an Intel perspective, so that we are making, you know, we're making not guesses, but we're making educated, well-informed assessments. And I think that's a really key component of the intelligence discipline, no matter what component you're playing in on it.
And since you already brought up SATs, Rick, one of the things that I've found most useful when thinking about anticipatory intelligence is the final step of an ACH, an analysis of competing hypotheses. If you all out there aren't familiar with ACH, I'm sure you will be by the end of the summit. But where you identify what are those signposts that would make you change your analysis or would have you make you go back and reevaluate things. And I think the more time we can focus on what are the signposts of things that would make me say, oh, this might be the path that we need to follow, or this might be the next step that the adversaries might go down. I think that will help us move from like that random predictions, which is really just things, anything you could think of, and then maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't, and apply some of that rigor around it. And yes, speaking of SATs, one of the new things that I'm doing, I've never led a workshop at CTI Summit before. So Scott Roberts, my intelligence-driven incident response co-author, and I are leading a structured analytic techniques for CTI workshop, where we're going to touch on a lot of these things and build on some of the things that I'm sure Jeannie will talk about and that will come up with our the other talks around. Yes, there's a big emphasis, I think, especially in 578, on analysis of competing hypotheses. But there's, Rick, to your point, there's a whole book on structured analytic techniques. So we're going to talk about how you can use key assumptions checks. We're going to talk about using the SWOT, strengths and weaknesses model, where you're identifying different things, again, that you want to look out for and things that might help you apply some of that rigor to your analysis. So this is going to be great. This is on day 2. It's available for folks in person. So hopefully some of you who will be there in person will be able to hop in and learn a lot more about SATs.
I love that it's
my book. Where's
I
my
love
book? I think it's in my suitcase actually, because I take it when I'm teaching.
Oh,
Yeah, Rick, just go live.
Here we
There
go.
we go. Thank you. That's the one I was
Yeah.
looking for. We'll drop a link in.
What I like about this talk in particular, though, is it's the accessible ones, because in ACHs are very common. They're done in a lot of blogs and things along those lines. But key assumptions check, a SWOT, that is something that's accessible to everyone. So I like that for this talk that y'all are doing, that approach is like, here's some things that anybody can do. You don't have to have a huge threat intelligence team to do it. One thing I would say for those folks that are going to be online and won't be able to participate in this, if you go to the SANS for YouTube page, you search for SATs, you will find a number of talks over the 12 previous years where we've covered it. So if this is something that's interesting to you, I've done, I think, 2 talks over the years on SATs. So even the online folks can go back to the historical record and get some benefit out of this.
Yep, absolutely. I'm going to drop a link in right now. I think this is you. Is it 2018, Rick? You can take a look at this link and tell me if this is yours. But yeah, we've had structured analytic techniques. Like, this is one of the topics that if you're newer, it's kind of foundational to cyber threat intelligence, and we'll hit it in many different ways. And yeah, ACH, analysis of competing hypotheses. So we said that's the one everyone focuses on, but Becca, I love that your workshop is going to talk about these other ones too. And so if you aren't coming in person, if you're coming in person, first off, you should go to this. And I'm Rick, like, would you mind emceeing while I go to Becca's workshop? Because I would love to go. So thanks.
I know, I'm jealous too. That is a presentation that I did as well. So you were right on that one you picked out.
Yep. And if you're not coming in person, right, check out this book. This is what Rick pulled off his bookshelf. I was looking for mine. It's somewhere. But this is a really good one from Richard Hoyer, who's the one who created ACH, and also Randolph Fearson. And it's kind of divided by different challenges, right? Like, are you trying to synthesize information? So this is it's not a cheap one. Oh man. Okay. It's like $52 on Kindle. Oh, maybe you can find it cheaper elsewhere. But it's a good investment. But just searching through, there's also the Richard Hoyer book, Psychology of Intelligence Analysis, free online PDF if you don't want to spend this much. But,
and I'm going to throw another one out there too, as well, that Scott and I have used when building out our workshop, which is Critical Thinking for Strategic Intelligence. Which I think is also, it's by Fearson as well, who did this, but it's more how you can apply some of the structured analytic techniques in different ways to solve different types of problems. Let's see if you can find that one.
I think I don't actually have this one. So thank you for the book recommendation. I like buying new books.
Oh, and there's the newer edition with the purple cover. That's the one we're using.
All right. Purple cover.
Purple cover.
I like it. So you have a couple of book recommendations, whether you're coming in person or not. So structured analytic techniques, definitely going to be a theme of the summit. And actually, this is a good transition. So much to talk about. One of the cool things we have, if you're coming in person, you're actually going to get like a little notebook with a bunch of different cheat sheets, like activities. If you're not coming in person, though, we've still got you covered. Becca and I just pulled this together. If you're familiar with SANS, you know that often there are cheat sheets, right, of command lines, etc. And we felt like we need a CTI cheat sheet, right? All the other classes have them. So Becca and I were like, let's make a cheat sheet. So go ahead. This is totally free. You need to log into your SANS account. I'll just show you. We have a couple of things like structured analytic techniques. So you can print this out. We'll have paper copies at the CTI Summit in your little workbook. But let's say that you're out in your everyday life and you need to think about what are approaches I could use to reduce my bias. You can have your cheat sheet, like really fun at parties, right? I don't know. I would bring it out at parties. So the steps of ACH, again, if you're newer, right? Cool. This is a great learning resource for you. If you're more experienced, hey, just kind of a little pocket guide, refresher on some of these things. And so, yeah, a lot of the ones that Becca mentioned, key assumptions check. And I found some of these are actually useful in everyday life too, right? If I'm trying to decide where I go for dinner? Or like, am I assuming that that restaurant isn't good because it wasn't good once? It's amazing how these things can apply not just to CTI, but also your everyday life. So, Becca, were there parts of the CTI cheat sheet, we worked on this together, that you think were particularly cool?
So the structured analytic techniques, because that's kind of been my jam lately. But I really like the rule of two, and just remembering that, because, and we'll have a couple of talks about this at the summit as well, about, clustering. But as we mentioned before, like, the landscape is getting more and more complex. And what I think sometimes when you hear about an attack, or and it sounds similar to something you've already heard of before, you can just mentally lump things together in your head. And so again, just having this cheat sheet available, having it on your desk, having it on your wall, can just remind you to not do, these mental shortcuts that might have served us in the past, but aren't going to be as effective in like the increasingly complex threat landscape. So for me, kind of just seeing that rule of two, it's quick, it's easy, it's a nice little visual, just reminding us that we want to have consistency. We want to have those kind of overlaps in at least two vertices of the diamond model before we try and start to even mentally cluster groups together. That was always a really good, it's a good reminder. And just in general, Katie, you mentioned this being really helpful if you're new to the field and you want to remind yourself that these different models and frameworks exist. Like, I think at the top we have, the diamond model and the kill chain. But even as you progress in your career, I think it can almost become easy to just say like, oh, I don't need to think about these things. I'm just like, I can just jump to an assessment without doing the work, without putting in the rigor. And having something like this cheat sheet nearby will remind you of these quick frameworks, these quick tricks that you can do to just apply that analytic rigor to the work that you're doing.
Yep, absolutely. The rule of two, yeah, check this one out. As Becca said, right, the idea is like, okay, in my brain, a bunch of intrusions have had malware with a specific mutex, right? Or they victimize a bunch of banks, and I still kind of use this mentally if like my team's looking at, there are all these intrusions and I think there are overlaps. Okay, what are the overlaps? Let's break it down with the diamond model. And so, yeah, helpful if you're newer, but helpful if you're experienced and your brain is just full of intrusion information. You need to structure it out. I also wanted to call out one of my favorite, this is like, I told Becca, this is one of my favorite slides in the entire course, is the assessment equation. And this is the example that I use in class, right? Assessments, right? Assessments are not facts, they're different. And like, how do I think about if I'm making an assessment? This is an equation: confidence plus analysis plus evidence as sources. So for example, right, and I say this on day 5 in the class, I assess with high confidence, there's my confidence. What's my analysis? Ice cream's gonna be served at break. Okay, that's my analysis, but why am I saying that? What is it based on? The evidence, there's a freezer in the lobby, and then I have some sources, a bunch of SANS instructors told me we're gonna get ice cream. It seems kind of silly, but even if you can get into the habit, even if you don't use confidence, right? Saying, here's my analysis, here's my evidence. This is something that like I've tried to, emphasize to my team members. It's really, really helpful. So that's probably maybe my favorite part of the cheat sheet. All right. So cheat sheet, you got that. That is a take-home resource. Yeah, this is kind of a synthesis of course content from Forensics 578. Rick, if you had to choose a favorite cognitive bias or logical fallacy, what's your favorite cognitive bias? Because I'm sure you have one because you're a CTI nerd.
I do. In fact, I think in the slides or the presentation that you referenced, it's got those ones in there. And those are really good ones to have. Like anchoring, I think, is one that in all aspects of life, you anchor on your first opinion on something and then you become entrenched on it. And so I think that's one to look out for. Again, and you made the analogy, Katie, that this applies to other parts of your life. I think all of these cognitive biases can make your relationships better, your finances better, that sort of stuff. Confirmation bias is really common. Everyone is probably guilty of confirmation bias on a weekly basis that's out there. I like mirror imaging as well. I think that's an important one for analysts as they think about other cultures. You need to think about the other culture in the context of the other culture, not in the way that we view our culture. And there's different standards, morality that other cultures have. So you can't apply a Western European or North American perspective to things. So yeah, I like all of those ones that are there. Hindsight bias, that's a good one too. Oh, yep. I knew it. Hindsight's 2020.
Knew it all along. Did you though? Or are you just saying that because you want to feel smart? I get it. We all want to feel smart, and we are. Yeah, anchoring is one that I feel like this one creeps up, and even just knowing these, again, structured analytic techniques you're going to hear about, cognitive biases you're going to hear about a ton in the summit because of how they creep into our everyday lives and our analysis. And anchoring is one I find, like an example. Let's say you're investing in an intrusion, and you search an IP and your open sources, and something on Virus Total says this is black bossed or ransomware. Let's say that you go through and you find 5 other threat reports that say it's actually Ransom Hub ransomware, not Black Bosta. You're less likely to change your mind because the first piece of information you found said it was Black Bosta. And so that's one way I've found, and this is even, I see it in myself now because I've started to do this. It's often easier to see in other people, but anchoring on one piece of information, often the first thing you saw, it's a tough one to get past. So again, print this out. Really fun at parties. All right, let's go back to our agenda. We're hopping around. There's so much to talk about. As always, we talked about Rebekah's workshop in person only, but we talked about how you have all kinds of structured analytic technique options. Looping back to where we started, keynotes. Rebekah, you also had this amazing idea. Do you want to talk about why we invited Daniel Shore to come and talk about mental health and well-being?
Yes, so I'm really excited for our day 2 keynote as well. This is something that we have been, I think, bringing to the summit over the past few years in bits and pieces. Cyber threat intelligence, we're using our minds, we're using our brains. That is how we're able to do this analysis. And we use a lot of resources, and we'll go to Virus Total and we'll go to different places, but that analysis actually happens in our brains and in our teams. And so if you remember a few years back, we had a talk about the importance of sleep for good cyber threat intelligence. And we've talked about sharing and collaboration and teamwork, because these are all just really important fundamentals. And Dr. Shore last year was at the CTI Summit. And if you remember, I think it was day 2, he asked a question around how burnout impacts analysis. Again, since it is such a mentally intensive task, how do the things that we've been seeing happen in the industry around stress and overwhelm and burnout, how does that impact analysis? And I thought it was such a great question that we invited him to come back the next year and dive into that and dive into his research that he's done working specifically around things like stress and burnout and resilience in cybersecurity. So just a warning out there to everyone in person and online, the questions you ask might end up leading you to come be on the stage next year. So we're always looking for great questions and unique aspects. And so I think this is something that is going to be just help us all think about how we can be better analysts and how we can better support ourselves and support the teams and the other folks we work with, because it can be a very stressful and taxing job that we all do. I don't know, Katie and Rick, you guys, when I mentioned it, I was so happy that you didn't think it was a crazy idea. Everybody was on board. What made you excited about it?
Yeah, Rick, I'll let you go first.
I mean, the threat landscape is relentless. I mean, Katie kind of led off with that as we started today. And you've got to be at your best or operating at a very high level to do this. So I think this is important for all aspects of cybersecurity. I think even more so in the intelligence, where you're making an assessment. You can't make a good assessment if you're exhausted. So I think it's great. I think it's a nice benefit to the folks that are going to be on site with some of the other things that we're doing with this as well. So I think this would be I'm glad to see over the past, 18 months to 24 months, just in general, a more openness to discuss, stress and burnout and mental health within broader cybersecurity. And I think this will be a really good talk with some tools that people can use to try to be more successful in their jobs and in their lives.
Yeah, I think this is something that we all experience, and we're starting to break down the stigma. And so anything that I think we as a community or we as chairs or speakers can do to start to make everyone realize that, first off, this is a thing we all wrestle with. And then like arming people with techniques and just talking about it. And I think, as you said, Becca, the interesting framing here, like this is actually applicable to our ability to do analysis. I know that like if I've had a long day and no breaks after 8 hours of Zooms, like, no, I'm not going to be able to tackle a really complex clustering of intrusions question. And I think just realizing that so important. And, you know, cybersecurity, like there are similarities and differences from other fields. You know, I think of like investment banking as stress. But if you think about cybersecurity overall, like and CTI, we're involved in things that have really important outcomes. Like our analysis, right, could prevent someone from getting ransomed, like real world impacts. And like that's, I don't know, that's part of why I love this field. But I think recognizing that we work in a high pressure environment and in a high pressure job, and that pressure and like how our brains are reacting to it can really affect how we perform. And so I think just shining a light on this. The other cool thing is for in-person folks, Daniel and his team member, Zach, are actually going to do in-person coaching sessions. So, right, I'm hoping I can get some time with them and just say like, hey, how do I deal with the fact that I have 8 hours of Zooms and like I'm burnt out by the end of the day and tired? And I think, you know, just reflecting on this isn't just like a touchy-feely, feel-good thing. This has actual impact on our ability to do analysis. I think that's what's really important here. All right, looking forward to that, confronting it head on. And so I think it'll be a good conversation starter. Scrolling through, trying to think of other things. We have a bunch of things happening. How about, let's talk about the new to CTI track. Again, we have different tracks. I think it's on day one. So day one, basically we have main track. And then we also have our new to CTI track. And I think last year was the first year we did this, right? And we got really great feedback. So what we found is the CTI Summit is helpful in different ways for different people, right? If you've done this for a long time, like Rick, grizzled old Rick here used to have hair, 13 years, right? Maybe it's for you looking at things in a different light or refreshing or thinking about things in a different way. If you're newer, right, we realize that you might have a different experience and need a different level of information. And so that's this new to CTI track meant to kind of be tailored for you. So of course, anyone can go to either one, but the new to CTI track is virtual. And Rick, Rebekah, any thoughts on kind of the new to CTI track or kind of talks you're excited about in that one?
I'll be kind of hosting this one, so I'll join, you know, the regular summit after this one wraps up. I would make the comment that even if I'm looking at two of the ransomware talks that we have there, it's current stuff with ransomware. Ransomware landscape, as an example, like used to be Lockbit, Leader. You mentioned Ransom Hub a little while ago, Kate. Like what groups are doing the ransom activity is very different now on the public leak sites. So there could be nuggets in here for someone that's very interested in extortion in general to take away. So I think there's benefits even if you're not new to cyber, as you kind of said. One that I like in here is Target's going to be presenting on building the CTI brand, a path to success. For those that may not know, Target won an award for the retail ISAC for, I can't remember the name, but it's kind of like most collaborative CTI team that's out there. Target's been leading the way in the retail space on intel and giving back to organizations in the ISAC and beyond. So I think there's probably some lessons that could be, again, you don't have to be new to CTI for this one. If you're in a sector and you want to start building your brand out, I think there's going to be a lot of lessons here. So I'm excited about that one and the ransomware ones in general, because ransomware is so dynamic right now. I think that could benefit everybody.
I'm intrigued by, Matt's talk on building the CTI brand. And like we've talked about, personal branding, which I'm just like, I don't know, I am who I am, but right, like having a CTI team brand, because sort of sometimes we have to sell our team and our value, right? intelligence, sometimes people don't really understand why is a CTI team helpful. And so I could definitely see how like a well-branded team and like imagining like a cool graphic. So I'm excited to hear that one myself.
Yeah, you get the what would you say you do here, and if you brand your team internally, even
Yeah.
that to just building on riffing Katie a little bit, right? Target's done a lot externally with their brand in the ISAC, but if you're struggling for resources, technology, staff, like I'm sure there's going to be lessons here that you can use to build a brand for your customers as a CTI team. That could be the SOC, that could be threat hunters, that could be the IT team that maybe is having to remediate things that the CTI team is finding out there. So I think this will be beneficial both, inside your organization, but also outside your organization as well.
And probably for personal branding.
Mm-hmm.
And fun fact, what would you say you do here was the title of the first SANS Summit talk I ever gave, which was a
I forgot that.
And I can't remember what year.
Is that where you had your line about free as in puppies with respect to open
No,
source?
this is before that. This is before that, I believe.
If you have a link back,
I'll pull that up. I'll find it.
I was going to make a snarky comment about like, did YouTube exist? But it did. Yeah. It's only been around for 13 years, not like this was 50 years ago. But yeah, and the ransomware, CTI brand, ransomware, I will say one of our new to CTI track talks, I have looked at the slides for, and it's really interesting. And this is one, as we said, it's new to CTI, but I had some interesting takeaways from this one. Basically, they were comparing, right, intrusions, and looking at links between Cicada and Black Cat ransomware. And like there were some similarities and some overlaps. And I think this one is cool because, harkening back to structured analytic techniques, they walk through kind of a structure for how they started comparing different pieces of evidence. Anyone who's done intrusion analysis, we often have this feeling like I've seen something like this before, but it's kind of a challenge to unfurl that and look at the evidence overlap. So this is a really rich one as well. And yeah, as Rick noted, like ransomware, I don't know, before this presentation, it's like Cicada. Like, what is Cicada? I've never heard of this one. There are so many ransomware groups. So if you haven't heard of Cicada either, will be helpful. So ransomware talks, another thing in person while we're here. Super excited. Again, I kind of want to go to the in-person workshops. So we'll have to figure this out. John Doyle, a certified instructor for Forensics 578, is teaching a class workshop based on the Forensics 589 cybercrime intelligence, which is another intelligence-based SANS class. And he's going to talk about infrastructure analysis, infrastructure hunting. So this is going to be a really, really cool one that I would like to attend as well. So maybe we just need to have someone else chair the summit and MC, and then we can all go to the workshops.
I do think it is, when you see the invitations for next year come out, sign up for in-person early before it sells out, because, we're adding these nice little nuggets in for folks that can attend locally. And I know some folks can't, which is great that we have the virtual track, but I think it's another reason to get an early bird discount, sign up sooner than later, so you don't miss out on anything that we do next year in person.
Yep, absolutely. So we talked about the ransomware talks, and we talked about some of the themes that we'll have. We always have structured analytic technique themes. We always have cognitive bias themes. I'm trying to think through, are there other themes, especially if folks are newer, like things that they should, and as you can see, a lot of laptop requirements, things that they should go into the summit knowing. I know one that we called out last year and we tried to do better with is the abbreviation thing. So I guess, how about audience, if you can help us with this, like what are some of the abbreviations we use in cyber threat intelligence or cybersecurity? So I mean, CTI, we got that one, cyber threat intelligence. Annoying
priority
Priority
intelligence requirements.
PIR. The annoying thing about IR, intelligence requirements, incident response, it can also mean like 20 other things. All right. So IR is another one. IOC, indicator of compromise. TTP, tactic, technique, and procedure. Again, going back to that cheat sheet, this is where our frameworks, right? MITRE ATT&CK comes in. So need a cheat sheet. IOC, another interesting interpretation of IOC is this definition of a threat: intent, opportunity, and capability. So we will try as much as we possibly can to spell out the acronyms. Becca, what acronyms do you think of that we should make sure people know?
I think we've hit the big ones. ACH, analysis of competing hypothesis, we've talked about. What else do we have that's CTI specific?
Attack. I'm assuming attack will make a MITRE ATT&CK framework will make an appearance in some of the talks. So I think that would be a helpful one to understand the TTPs in that.
Yep.
TTPs.
See,
I just did it.
TTPs. Yeah, like everyone knows what you mean. So yeah, if you are newer, again, we're gonna have a Slack channel. Ask, right? Ask someone. It's always a little scary, especially if you're newer to the field, to ask a question like that. But if you don't know, someone else doesn't know. So yeah, this is also CTI cheat sheet, a great kind of primer. There are things you read in here like you're not familiar with. Go check out MITRE ATT&CK. I have the matrix on my wall. Check out those tactics. What do these things mean?
AAS, anything as, malware as a service, ransomware as a service, phishing as a service. Yes, so that will actually, there's quite a few talks around the kind of the diversification of the threat landscape and the specialization. Yeah, so the as a service at the end of another word is usually talking about someone doing something on another group's behalf to enable their operations.
There it is. Fast.
It's bad. It's bad. Like it's like the lowering of the bar for criminals. Like I contend that most folks need to have opportunistic cybercrime at the top of their threat models. You know, some vertical will have a little bit different that's out there, but you don't have to be an expert in malware. You don't have to be writing cryptors and things like that. You can pay someone for it. You can get phishing as a service. You can get DDoS as a service. And so, you know, again, to what Katie led off with about the threat landscape being overwhelming, right? This is one of the reasons, because the proliferation of as a service over the past, I mean, some of this stuff's 10 years old, right? But with AI in particular too, and some of the fraud GPTs and things along those lines, like the barrier to entry for threat actors in general just keeps getting lower and lower. And it makes the defender's job much, much harder. So hopefully you'll come to the summit and take away some tips and build some relationships that can help you deal and be able to deal with the stress as well of all of this stuff.
Yep. And they're phishing as a service, PHAAS, malware as a service, right? A lot of these, and note, we didn't even talk about this, a concept you're almost certainly going to hear about, and I think it's related to the as a service, is attribution. What, you know, I've seen, and I'm sure Rebekah, you've seen this as well, like if one person is selling, right, the phishing as a service, and then, right, I'm buying that as an adversary. And then like, maybe I have my friend come and deploy this, or maybe I buy malware to package in with my phishing as a service. And then there are at least like 3 adversaries involved. Like, who is that activity attributed to? And so I'm excited to kind of hear about attribution related to phishing as a service. I'm certain attribution is going to come up. It's a challenging assessment to make, for sure.
But I think we are actually, as a community, getting better at it. And Rick, like you said, that opportunistic cybercrime should be at the top of a lot of people's threat models. And I think that's a place where we found that when we have groups and analysts who can actually get that cybercrime attribution right and justify it and nail it and show all of the proof that they need, we're seeing arrests take place in a lot of these criminal groups. And so this is a example, I think, where attribution, it is hard and it is important and it's having an impact. And so as we hear a lot of these case studies as well and the different models, I'm going to be listening for that impact of the ability to identify and analyze the work that they're doing, not just for defense, but for actual prosecution in some cases.
Yep, absolutely. And to go back to something, it's not an abbreviation, but we did just throw it out, threat model. What is a threat model? And there are so many answers to this. I'm curious, like Rebekah, who has a 1-sentence description of what a threat model, what do you mean when you say threat model?
Oh, that's a good one. because it's like, I know what it is, but how do you describe it? Well, I think a lot of the threat modeling came up and some of the confusion in space due to application threat modeling, with stuff with Microsoft that was doing, where you're looking at an application and looking at the code and the different threats that are out there. When I think about it for enterprises, I think more of like, who are the threat actors that are likely to target me? Rank those threat actors, look at their TTPs. You can use MITRE ATT&CK for the open source stuff there. But you know, at the end of the day, it's like, is it a criminal that's targeting me? Is that at the top of my threat model? Do I have a lot of intellectual property? Is a nation state like China targeting me because they want to steal my intellectual property? Am I at risk from a nation state because of something geopolitical, because perhaps I do business in a region in Ukraine or Israel or something along those lines? So for me, I don't know that I have the best definition for it, but I think, what are the groups of actors that are likely to target me? And then what are the controls and detections that I can put in place to try to mitigate those risks? I don't know, Becca, what do you got?
I think that was a definition, Rick.
No, that was great. I think that the two important parts are of a threat model is what you know about yourself. Where do you operate? What technologies do you use? What are your own gaps and weaknesses and those opportunities that are going to allow an actor to successfully target you? And then what are those outside actors who would be interested or who might target you based on all of the things that you know about yourself? So it's not just looking outward and memorizing the name of every threat group out there. It's knowing about yourself and your organization, or even you as an individual in some cases, to see who might target you.
I'm cheating. This is like how I simplify it.
A picture's worth 1,000 words right there.
Exactly, right? Us, what do we have? Them, what are the adversaries? The overlap, right? But yeah, it's something that we throw around a lot, and I think everyone has slightly different definitions, but like, I generally think of like some kind of like prioritized list of threats that are going to impact you or your organization. So
it makes me think back to, was it last year that Lincoln, yeah, it was last year, Lincoln Kaffenberger, who is at Deloitte, he did a talk on geopolitical risk, and he had some tools that you could use to try to identify geopolitical risks that could impact your threat model. I'll look for the YouTube link for that talk as well. But third-party risk fits into this as well. Like, what are the third parties? What countries are in? Could you be targeted?
Yep, I think I found it. There's so many talks. It's amazing the amount of the number of talks that I've already forgotten, and so good to have refreshers and all of these go backs. So threat modeling, talked about that. Rick, you mentioned AI. I think we have an AI talk or two. I can't remember which ones they are, but yeah, AI is such an interesting one because I don't know about you all. I feel like, yes, it's here to stay. The question I always get is, how are adversaries using AI? And I don't know if you all have seen, reports or have visibility, like, I don't know, Becca, in your day job, you might have visibility into this, but I found, based on what I've observed from OpenAI, Microsoft, others, and heard, a lot of it is like adversaries are using AI the way I hope we would, to like enhance their ability to do research. So I'm curious if either of you have thoughts on the AI. What are threats doing with AI question?
Yeah, so this is all, I will not say speculative, but we haven't been able to get enough insight into their actual operations, at least from my perspective, to say, oh, here's what they're doing. But some of the trends we're seeing are things like phishing emails are getting way more convincing. And if you think about it, if you think about adversaries who, for example, target someone's cloud-based mail account, and they can scrape all that information out there and they can run that through a model. And now they can actually create a way to craft emails to then target other people that sound exactly like that person. They know how you talk to people, the terms you use, the way you sign off. And so it can kind of bypass, as defenders, our recommendations of, oh, look for these things, look for something that's out of the ordinary, look for someone talking in a way that, like, this person has never asked you to buy them a bank gift card before. But what do they ask you for? And so they can build information and actually craft some of those socially based social engineering lures far more effectively. So that's one way that I am suspecting it's being used that I'm really concerned about.
I just, maybe Katie, if you can post that link that I just dropped, the NCSC, which is a UK kind UK government agency, the NCA is a component of it, but they had a piece that they did about a year ago, and there's a really nice table on it, and it says it's table 1, extent of capability uplift caused by AI over the next 2 years, and they break the act. It's just a little bit right there. They break the actors out into highly capable state actors, capable state actors, and then less skilled. And it talks about, I love this because it's got intent, capability, and it breaks down. So I think this is kind of a non-hyperbolic way. And the TLDR on this report was threat actors over the next 2 years are going to use AI to accelerate their operations, but it's going to be a continuation of the same types of attacks that we've historically seen. It's not going to be some new novel type of attack that's out there. Now, this report's over a year old now, so it'd be interesting to see a refresh. But to your point, Katie, I see, at least in the actors that we track, it's more force multiplier for their operations, and types of things that, frankly, we'd like to be able to see. But you can imagine, like, completely using AI to go out and automate OSINT and, building out target packages and things along those lines. But you also don't need to use AI. I mean, you can script things out. So it's always to me, I think of AI as a means to the end, right? What is the outcome that we as defenders are trying to get with AI, and what are the outcomes that the criminals are? I do have a pro tip for people submitting talks for next year. Over the years, we've always had like triggering subjects that make it in. And one year it was dark web, and it's kind of evolved. The AI, there was a ton of AI talks that were out there, but they were so ethereal or marketing speak that, and the ones that we selected were better quality. We had a good talk last year on AI as well. So if you're thinking about submitting to CTI Summit next year or any SANS Summit, and you're going to have something around AI, just know that is going to be in the word cloud bubble of talks. It's going to be out there. So you better have something interesting and useful and not marketing, because it will, almost universally get denied. We do a blind review in our submissions, and you could go through and see the AI talks that people are just like, this isn't useful. What's happening here? So be on the lookout for that if you're submitting in future summits.
I love this. I don't think I've ever seen this in CSC report. And tying back to what we talked about, like structured analytic techniques, like a table, a framework to think about, right, how actors might be using AI. I'm going to keep this in my report Rolodex, because even if this has changed, right, like it gives us a framework to think about, right, how are these adversaries, what's their intent, capability, how does that affect their use of AI? So thanks, Rick. I like this. All right. And if you like AI, I should mention there's a SANS Summit for everything, right? The AI Summit, I had to double check. Yeah, this is coming up too. So if you want to join us for CTI Summit, Monday, Tuesday, the AI Cybersecurity Summit is online and also in Denver. So March 31st through April 1st. So there you go. If you like AI content, you can head on over to that summit. Coming back to this summit, our CTI Summit, just scrolling through, thinking about all of the other talks. What else do we want to preview? I guess one that I wanted to hit on, talking a little bit about, we talked about the new to CTI track, bringing new people into the field. Looks like I might have frozen. That's okay. I'm going to turn off my camera and turn it back on, but it sounds like you can hear me. So bringing new people into the field, this KC7 talk. KC7, we had them do a workshop previously, and I'm really excited. Brian is actually an instructor at a high school, right? Jibby is a member of the KC7 team at Microsoft. They're going to talk about like how they have used KC7 to teach high school students, right, how to do cyber threat intelligence. So I'm really excited for this. If you haven't checked out KC7, definitely check that out. Again, I think that, one of the things that we feel really passionately about is bringing new people into this field. It's cool for those of us who've been in it for a while, but, if you're new, you're welcome here too. And we want you to learn, because we need so many more analysts in this field. And so KC7 is an awesome way to do this. I'll drop a link into this one as well. And I also wanted to mention on the note of mentorship, I forget if it's day 1 or day 2, we have a mentor-mentee pair. Becca, if you want to talk about Scott and Chandler's talk a little bit. Scott Roberts, kind of your co-author of your book.
Yeah, so I'm excited for their talk because so Scott has been in the field for a long time. He started out doing incident response and then shifted into CTI. That's one of the reasons he and I work so well together. Is I came the other way. I started in intelligence and shifted into IR. So we kind of got to the same place from different paths, which is it's been great. And he also is I believe it's an associate professor, I'm probably using the wrong words, at Utah State University, working with their Center for Anticipatory Intelligence. And Chandler started out as one of his students. And was part of our new to CTI track and kind of gave the perspective of his journey through academia and I think he interned at CrowdStrike last year. And so they're actually doing a main stage talk together this year about STRAT, which is a new methodology for CTI. And Chandler has always, through every time I think he's participated in any of our summits or activities, he's just spoken so highly of the how mentorship can help somebody who is coming into cybersecurity, whether it's CTI or other fields, because it can just be a very complex and daunting field. And where do I start and where do I fit and where should I specialize? And so I'm really excited to see their talk together, just to see what happens when you have a mentor-mentee pair who find that they work really well together and kind of are going to bring new concepts to us.
Yeah, and I think this is a cool example of, if you're looking at submitting to other SANS summits or for next year, like even if you're newer to this, don't let that intimidate you. I found sometimes that folks with new perspective can see things that those who've been doing this for a while can't. And so a new take on something, how I learned to do CTI, right? All of those things would be great talks. All right, we have talked about so much. I'm just scrolling through so many things we're excited about. There's going to be a night in for folks in person. We always have fun kind of networking, talking to each other. Again, for folks online, there is going to be networking opportunities in Slack. And so take advantage of that. If you sign up, then the Slack will be available through your sign-in page where you can access the summit. I'm also particularly excited when I saw the names for this talk. There are 2 John Stoners, at least, in cybersecurity. And they now both work at Google Cloud. And so really excited about their talk. Talking a little bit about data. And data analysis is sort of, tangential or kind of an adjacent field to cyber threat intelligence. I've worked with data scientists who are absolutely brilliant. And I'm glad that they do the hard work and we just give them the interesting questions, right? We give them the PIRs, priority intelligence requirements, which they spelled out here, which is nice. And so, yeah, I'm excited for this one, taking a step back and thinking about, okay, we have these intelligence requirements, these questions or needs. Do we have the right data to even identify or try to be able to answer them? And so the 2 John Stoners, and I don't know how we're going to do this virtually, like over to you, John Stoner, and like back to you, John Stoner. So should be another good one. All right. Rebekah, other talks or things that you really wanted to highlight before we start to wrap here?
I'm excited about Sydney's talk. It's day 1 right after the keynote. And it is about basically the progression of a CTI career. And I love that I've been doing this long enough now as a summit that we have people who are not just thinking about coming into cyber, but how to grow or into CTI, but how to grow within their roles. And I love it because one of the things that Sydney told me was, as she had kind of been talking to people and practicing and going over what her talk would be about, she would get different responses from everyone. She had people who were like, oh, great, I've always wondered how I can move into, like, what does CTI management look like? And there's someone else who was like, oh, that's so great because I've always wanted to work more on the IR side. And so it's awesome that you're talking about that. And that everyone she talked to had a slightly different idea of what career growth and career progression means. And that often the thing that's kind of getting in the way is that fear, that thought that like, well, I don't know how to do that, or I don't know if anybody would do that, or is that the right move for me? And so I love that she's going to kind of talk about what a career looks like. And for people who have been doing CTI for a number of years and have worked collaboratively with a lot of other teams, what are those options and how can you decide how you're going to be the best analyst you can be. So I'm really excited for that talk.
Yeah, I was just highlighting CISO because Rick, like, yeah, you're a CISO, you're at that level. I think this is something I feel as well. Like sometimes as you go into leadership, like you get to be less close to the day-to-day analysis.
Mm-hmm.
You're sad, but it's cool too, right? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of options in the path as it's matured over the past, I don't know, 15 years of private sector intelligence. There's career paths that have done, and Sydney's also a repeat speaker too, which will be nice to see her back.
Yeah. And speaking of speakers, we just had a comment come in from none other than Brian, one of our presenters of the KC7 talk. So don't be nervous, Brian. It's a very friendly audience. Like now we're all friends. You know us. You know everyone who's listening to the stream. We're really excited for your talk and for everyone else's. Well, we are towards the top of the hour. So let's start to wrap here. I'm just thinking through all of the fun events. This is a really great one. Do you remember this?
That
it's like
picture.
the Museum of Illusions DC, where Rick looks very, very small. He's taller than that in real life. It's such a fun event, so much to learn. And I think what's cool about it, not just the talks, but the workshops, the networking experiences, whether you're in person or online. And so hopefully we've kind of given you a few things to think about. All right, remember, take a look at that CTI cheat sheet. Whether you're in person, you'll get a paper copy, or online, some of the frameworks, the concepts you'll see. And of course, if you haven't already, go ahead and register. We'll drop the link in one more time. Totally free, live online. You can drop in, drop out if you get sidetracked with some kind of other analysis this Monday and Tuesday. And if you're coming in person to Alexandria, Virginia, Rick, Becca, and I will see you there. And make sure to say, hey, I was listening to the live stream. Then we'll know that you were there virtually, and then we get to meet you in real life. With that, I think let's leave it there. Rebekah Brown, Rick Holland, thank you so much for joining me. Again, this was this month's January edition of the SANS Threat Analysis Rundown. We hope to see you either in person or online at the SANS CTI Summit Monday and Tuesday, January 27th and 28th. Take care, everyone, and see you then.
See you soon.
Bye.